Chosen ones, there are moments in life when the veil between the physical and the unseen becomes so thin that even the smallest action, the softest whisper, the quietest choice sends a tremor through the heavens. You may not always realize it, but today was one of those moments. Today, by simply showing up as the person your soul has been longing for you to become, you touched heaven, and heaven noticed. Heaven felt you. Heaven was moved by you. There is a divine delight that surrounds you right now, a warmth you may not see with your eyes but can feel with that subtle awareness that lives behind your chest, behind your breath, behind your being. What you did today wasn't loud, it wasn't broadcasted, it wasn't for applause, it was something quieter, something truer. Perhaps it was the moment you chose patience when frustration was easier, or the moment you extended kindness even when your own heart felt tired. Maybe it was a decision you made in silence, a choice that no one knows about, a step toward becoming the person you promised your soul you would be long before you took your first breath. Whatever it was, it registered in the realm where purity is the only language. It echoed in a place where motives are clearer than words. It shimmered in the dimension where every genuine act of goodness is felt as light. And perhaps you don't see yourself as someone who could move heaven. So many people walk through their lives believing that their daily actions are too small, too ordinary, too human to matter to something as vast as the divine. But it is often the smallest acts that carry the most profound spiritual charge. A single thought anchored in love vibrates farther than 1,000 empty gestures. A quiet act of courage ripples across dimensions. A moment of forgiveness, a breath of humility, a gesture of compassion. These are the subtle deeds that reshape worlds. These are the movements of the soul that light up the unseen realms. Somewhere today, you chose the higher road. You chose growth over comfort. You chose love when fear tried to guide your steps. And that choice, that sacred choice, sent a wave of brilliance upward, a beam of intention that pierced through the layers of doubt and landed gently in the hands of the one who watches over you. If you have ever wondered whether your presence or your effort matters, let today be your answer, because the truth is simple. The divine is delighted with you, not because you were perfect, not because you had everything figured out, not because you never stumbled or hesitated, but because despite the doubts, despite the heaviness, despite the uncertainty, you still leaned toward the light. You still tried. You still decided that today would not be wasted on old patterns, old wounds, old fears. You took a step, maybe a small one, maybe a significant one, but it was a step in the direction of your highest self. And the heavens felt that shift in you. There is something profoundly sacred about the effort of a human heart determined to evolve. Every time you resist the pull of old limiting stories, the spiritual world celebrates. Every time you refuse to shrink back into the person you no longer want to be, the universe expands its embrace around you. Every time you choose integrity over convenience, or honesty over image, or faith over worry, something in creation vibrates differently. Today, you created that shift. Today, you generated that vibration. You may not realize it yet, but you participated in your own spiritual elevation. Maybe it happened in a conversation where you finally spoke your truth, maybe in a moment of solitude, where you made a decision that felt difficult but necessary, maybe in a situation where you broke a cycle you've been caught in for years, or maybe it was as simple as waking up and choosing not to give up on yourself. Even that, especially that, is felt by the heavens, because the divine is not moved by performance, it is moved by sincerity. It is not impressed by image, it is touched by authenticity. It is not looking for grandeur, it is waiting for willingness. And your willingness today radiated like a beacon. You may not label yourself as a chosen one, but hear this: being chosen doesn't mean being flawless. Being chosen means being responsive to the whispers of your soul. It means being willing to rise even when you've fallen 100 times. It means deciding that your life is meant for more than survival and repetition. It means hearing the quiet call that invites you to grow, to stretch, to soften, to open, to heal. And today you answered that call in your own way. That is why heaven is delighted with you. There is a light around you right now that wasn't there yesterday, not because something external happened, but because something internal aligned. You aligned with truth. You aligned with integrity. You aligned with the part of you that remembers where you came from and why you're here. That alignment sent out a frequency the divine responds to without hesitation. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you might feel a subtle reassurance rising inside you like a warm current. A feeling that says, "You did well," not in the loud voice of human praise, but in the soft echo of divine approval. You may sense it in the way your breath feels a little lighter, or your mind a little clearer, or your heart a little more open. That is heaven reflecting your own inner shift back to you. And if you've ever doubted whether the divine truly sees you, truly hears you, truly feels what is stirring within you, let today be your reminder. The unseen world is moved not by the loudness of your voice, but by the honesty of your intention. And something in you today was so honest, so pure, so aligned with your higher nature, that it caused a shift in dimensions. A small shift, perhaps, but a real one. The kind that accumulates, the kind that builds, the kind that eventually becomes the very thing that transforms a life. You might not realize how many old chains you quietly loosened today, how many past versions of yourself you gently stepped away from, how many inner doors you opened without making an announcement. Growth is often subtle like that. Transformation doesn't usually arrive like lightning. It comes like dawn, gradual, gentle, steady. And today, a new light broke over the horizon of your soul, a light that heaven witnessed with quiet joy. The truth is, the divine delights in your progress, not your perfection. Your willingness to try again, to breathe again, to believe again matters more than any flawless execution. Today, you believed, maybe in a small way, maybe in a private way, but you believed that you're capable of more than your past. You believe that you can take the next step even if you don't know the entire path. You believe that the whisper inside you deserves your attention. And when a human being believes in their own divine spark, heaven celebrates, because that belief is what reconnects you to the source from which you came. And perhaps you didn't even intend to touch heaven. Perhaps you were simply trying to do the right thing, or the kind thing, or the brave thing. But intention doesn't always reveal its magnitude to the one holding it. You might think you took a small step, but the divine sees it as a leap. You may think you gave a small effort, but heaven sees the courage behind it. You may think you simply made it through another day, but heaven saw the strength it required. What is ordinary to you can be extraordinary in realms where truth is the measure of value. There's a reason the unseen world is drawn to sincerity. Sincerity is the vibration of the soul without its disguises. And today, you were sincere, you were real, you were open in a way that only someone who is tired of old limitations can be, and that opening created a channel through which the divine delight could flow freely toward you. You may not see it, but you may feel an unusual ease around you right now, a quiet assurance, a gentle lifting that wasn't present before. That is the echo of heaven's delight. And maybe you wonder why the divine would care about your day, your choices, your inner shifts. But understand this, you are not insignificant to the source. You are a deliberate expression of it. Every step toward your higher nature is a homecoming. Every act of love is a return. Every moment of clarity is a reconnection. You are woven into creation in ways you cannot imagine. When you rise, something in the universe rises with you. When you heal, something in the universe becomes more whole. When you choose love, something in the universe becomes more luminous. Today, you contributed to that luminosity. You may not always feel heaven's response to your actions, but the absence of obvious signs does not mean the absence of impact. Divine communication is subtle. It arrives through intuition, through peace, through a sudden feeling of reassurance. It arrives as a thought you didn't expect but needed. It arrives as an inner softening where there was hardness before. It arrives in the unexplainable sense that you are not alone and have never been alone. When heaven is delighted with you, it shows up as alignment. a gentle shifting of your inner world, and right now, whether you recognize it or not, something in your inner world is aligning. Something is settling, something is widening, something is waking up. The effort you made today created that space, and when you create space within, the divine fills it with guidance, with clarity, with warmth, with encouragement. Not in loud ways, but in ways that are unmistakably true. You touched heaven today because you touched truth. You acted from the part of you that is eternal, not the part of you shaped by fear or limitation. And that matters deeply. The heavens recognize their own essence when they see it expressed through you. Every time you choose love over fear, you return to your original vibration. Every time you choose compassion, you return to your essence. Every time you choose courage, you return to your soul's memory, and the divine delights in your remembering. If you could see what heaven saw in you today, you would never doubt your worth again. You would never question whether you matter. You would never shrink yourself to fit into the small places you've outgrown. You would understand that you are playing a sacred part in a reality that is much larger than your circumstances. You would understand that even your struggles are part of a greater shaping, a greater refining, a greater calling. And you would know, deeply know, that nothing you do in sincerity, why is ever invisible. There may have been moments today when you felt tired, moments when the weight of life pressed on your shoulders, moments when you wondered if you're making any progress at all. But the divine sees the effort you make even when you're weary, especially when you're weary. To keep going when everything in you wants to stop is a sacred act. To keep believing when doubt tries to consume you is an offering. To keep loving when your heart has been bruised is a prayer. These are the moments heaven treasures most. You may not have noticed the way you shifted today, a subtle softening in your tone, a new clarity in your thoughts, a gentler way you move through the world. But heaven noticed. Heaven noticed because the divine is always aware of the internal shifts that lead to outward change. And today, something in you shifted in a way that will make the days ahead lighter. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your spirit becomes stronger, more aligned, more awake. There is something beautifully quiet about spiritual growth. It rarely announces itself. It rarely asks for recognition. It simply unfolds. And today, something unfolded within you. A layer peeled away. A truth rose to the surface. A decision aligned with your purpose. A pattern loosened its grip. You may feel it as a breath of fresh air, or a soft inner release, or a sense of being carried rather than dragged through your challenges. That is the divine responding to your shift. And the more you embrace these moments, the more heaven delights, because every moment of awakening brings you closer to the truth of who you are. You are not defined by the difficulties you've faced. You are not defined by the mistakes you've made. You are not defined by the times you fell short of who you wanted to be. You are defined by the light you carry, the love you hold, the intention you nurture. The sincerity you embody. And today, that sincerity shone through you like a quiet star. And perhaps you haven't yet recognized the magnitude of what shifted inside you today. Humans tend to measure progress by visible milestones, achievements, breakthroughs, big announcements, but heaven measures progress by alignment, by intention, by the direction in which your soul turns. And today, your soul turned towards something higher. Even if your outer life looks unchanged, your inner world made a decision, a sacred decision, a decision that heaven felt like a spark rising from your heart. Maybe it was the moment you paused before reacting and chose peace instead of old patterns. Maybe you finally allowed yourself to feel something you've been avoiding. Maybe you forgave yourself for something you've carried far too long. Maybe you extended compassion to someone who didn't deserve it in the eyes of the world, but deserved it in the eyes of your soul. Or maybe you simply whispered a quiet prayer, not from desperation, but from sincerity. These small moments are the language of heaven. They are the movements that angels feel like warm vibrations. They are the ripples that reach the divine. You see, the divine isn't looking for perfect people. The divine is looking for willing people, people who are willing to grow, willing to soften, willing to see differently, willing to release the old layers that have hidden their light. And today, you were willing, maybe not entirely, maybe not without hesitation, but you were willing enough. And sometimes a little willingness is all heaven needs to open doors you haven't even imagined yet. There is a place within you that knows why you're here, even when your mind doubts it. There is a wisdom behind your ribs that remembers your origin, remembers your purpose, remembers the ways your soul promised to stretch, to awaken, to elevate. And today, that ancient part of you stirred. Perhaps only for a moment, perhaps only in a breath, but it stirred. It responded. It said yes to something greater. And the divine felt that yes, if you could hear what heaven whispers about you, you would walk differently. You would speak differently. You would no longer question the value of your smallest acts of goodness. You would no longer wonder if anyone sees the battles you fight quietly within yourself. You would no longer underestimate the impact of your presence in this world. Because the unseen realm sees everything your soul does. And today, it saw something luminous. Maybe you woke up with heaviness but still chose to rise. Maybe you walked through your day with questions but still chose to trust. Maybe you were surrounded by uncertainty but still chose to take one small step. That is spiritual strength. That is soul maturity. That is evidence that you're becoming the person your future needs you to be, and heaven is delighted by that becoming, delighted by the way you keep choosing to move forward, even when forward doesn't feel easy. There is a grace around you right now, subtle but steady, like a hand placed gently on your shoulder, a reassurance that you are exactly where you need to be to learn what your soul came here to learn. You don't have to force your evolution. You don't have to prove your worthiness. You don't have to pretend to be more enlightened than you are. Spiritual growth happens naturally when the heart is sincere. And your sincerity today created an opening through which grace could flow. You touched heaven because heaven has been touching you for a long time, nudging you forward, guiding you through what felt like chaos, supporting you through what felt like loss, strengthening you through what felt like uncertainty. Sometimes the divine allows challenges not to break you, but to bring you closer, to peel away illusions, to help you see clearly, to reorient you toward your true path. And today, something in your spirit aligned with that guidance. You stopped resisting a lesson, or resisting love, or resisting your own intuition. And in that moment of surrender, heaven felt your openness. There are people who walk through life unaware of the sacredness of their own existence. They move on autopilot, forgetting that every breath carries purpose. But you, something in you is awakening. Something in you is remembering. Something in you is recognizing that your life is not random, your presence is not an accident, and your journey is not meaningless. The divine delights in awakening souls, and today, you awakened a little more. Even if you can't explain it, even if you can't justify it, even if you can't prove it to anyone, your soul knows, and heaven knows your soul. What you did today might seem small to you, but it wasn't small in the spiritual dimension. There are moments that look insignificant on the surface, but shift timelines beneath the surface. Moments that seem ordinary, but are extraordinary in intention. Moments that appear quiet, but resound loudly in the unseen. You experienced one of those moments today. Heaven felt it like a tuning of your inner instrument, a raising of your frequency, a softening of your field. You became more aligned with who you truly are. And as that alignment deepens, you may notice subtle changes in the way life responds to you. Perhaps someone smiles at you unexpectedly. Perhaps a conversation flows with unusual ease. Perhaps a problem resolves without you forcing it. Perhaps an idea arrives with clarity. These are not coincidences, they are reflections. Life mirrors the energy you offer. When you operate from truth, truth returns to you. When you operate from love, love gravitates toward you. When you operate from intention, opportunities align with you. Today, you activated that alignment in a new way. But understand this, the divine is not delighted only by what you accomplished. The divine is delighted by who you're becoming. There is a deeper strength. forming inside you, the kind that is not easily shaken. A deeper clarity forming in your mind, the kind that sees through illusions. A deeper compassion forming in your heart, the kind that embraces others without losing itself. And that depth is what heaven celebrates, because depth is where the soul resides. Maybe you didn't speak your deepest truth out loud today, but you admitted it to yourself. Maybe you didn't take the biggest leap, but you took the next step. Maybe you didn't break every old pattern, but you cracked one. That is how transformation begins. That is how awakening happens. That is how heaven is touched. Through honesty, through effort, through willingness, through alignment. And you embody those today more than you realize. There is a part of you that is so much stronger than the part that doubts, a part so much wiser than the part that fears, a part so much more eternal than the part that worries. And today, that deeper part of you came forward, even if briefly. It guided your choices, it softened your reactions, it whispered your next step. You may have felt it as intuition. You may have felt it as clarity. You may have felt it as peace. But heaven felt it as your soul stepping into its rightful place. And that is why you are surrounded right now by a quiet celebration. One you cannot see with your physical eyes but can feel with your spiritual awareness, a celebration of your courage, a celebration of your sincerity, a celebration of your growth, a celebration of your becoming. The divine delights in every soul that remembers its own light. And today you remembered, even if just for a moment. And perhaps the most beautiful part of what you did today is that you didn't do it for recognition. You didn't do it to impress anyone. You didn't do it to prove anything. You did it because something inside you is evolving, maturing, elevating. Something inside you is choosing the path of alignment over the path of ego. And nothing delights heaven more than a heart that acts from truth rather than for validation. When you move from truth, the divine recognizes you instantly, because truth is the original language of your soul. You may not know this yet, but every time you choose love over fear, your soul becomes more visible in the unseen world. Every time you choose patience over anger, a light within you grows brighter. Every time you choose faith over doubt, you step closer to the frequency of your divine origin. And today, perhaps without even trying, you lived in a way that reflected that frequency. You lived in a way that made heaven pause and smile. Even the way you handled challenges today, whether they were internal or external, carried a different energy. Maybe you normally would have reacted quickly, but today you paused. Maybe you normally would have spiraled into old thoughts, but today you stopped yourself. Maybe you normally would have allowed discouragement to win, but today you breathed through it just a little longer. That small act of awareness is spiritual power. It is the kind of moment that shifts entire trajectories because it proves to heaven that you are becoming conscious of your own evolution. It is important that you understand how deeply the divine values inner victories. Outer successes earn applause from people, but inner victories earn applause from heaven. And today, you achieved an inner victory. You made a choice your old self wouldn't have made. You embodied a grace you didn't even know you had. You allowed your spirit to lead and moments where your fear once held the steering wheel. These are the moments heaven treasures because they reveal who you are becoming. There are many people who live their entire lives without ever realizing the spiritual power of their small decisions. But you are beginning to notice the subtle shifts. You are beginning to sense when you fall out of alignment and when you return to it. You are beginning to feel the difference between when you act from love and when you act from fear. You are beginning to recognize the quiet voice within you that speaks in intuition, in knowing, in gentle guidance. And today, you listen to that voice more than you usually do. That is what touched heaven. You may think the divine delights in grand gestures, in dramatic transformations, in flawless spiritual performance. But what the divine delights in most is sincerity. And your sincerity today was unmistakable, even if it came wrapped in uncertainty, even if it came with a trembling heart, even if it came through tears or frustration or fatigue. Heaven does not see the mess. Heaven sees the intention within the mess. Heaven sees the purity behind the struggle. Heaven sees the courage behind the hesitation. And today, heaven saw courage in you. There is something incredibly sacred about a human being who keeps choosing to grow. Life is not easy, and the path of the soul is not always smooth. You have endured seasons of heaviness, of confusion, of heartbreak, of delay. You have walked through moments where you questioned whether anything spiritual was happening at all. And yet, despite it all, you kept moving, you kept reaching, you kept listening, you kept believing in that quiet inner pull that is impossible to explain but impossible to ignore. And today, that pull guided you again. It nudged you toward a thought or an action or a perspective that aligned with your Hest path. And when you followed it even slightly, heaven responded, because every time you say yes to growth, the divine offers you support you cannot always see. You may not feel it every time, but today, whether you recognize it or not, you opened a channel for new guidance to enter your life. And now, even as you breathe, something in you is shifting. A heaviness you've carried for too long is loosening its grip. A fear that once dominated your mind is weakening. A belief that once limited your steps is dissolving. You may not have words for it yet, but your energy is changing, your field is expanding, your spirit is rising, and the divine is responding to that rise with favor, with clarity, with alignment, with unseen blessings that will reveal themselves in time. You touched heaven because you touched your own truth, and when you touch your truth, heaven cannot help but respond. Perhaps there was a moment today when you felt something unclench in your chest, a moment when something softened that had long been hardened, a moment when you felt strangely peaceful, even if only for a second, a moment when you looked at someone with compassion instead of judgment, a moment when you forgave yourself without the usual self-criticism, a moment when you looked at life with a little more openness. That moment, however brief, was a spiritual breakthrough. Breakthroughs are not always loud. They are not always dramatic. Sometimes they are as quiet as a single breath where you choose not to be your old self. Sometimes they are as small as refusing to speak negatively about yourself. Sometimes they are as subtle as realizing you are tired of your own fear and choosing a different thought instead. These are the breakthroughs that heaven celebrates most, because they come from the deepest place within you, the place that remembers its divine origin. And your divine origin is what called you today. Something ancient within you stirred, awakening you to the possibility that our life is greater than your circumstances, greater than your fears, greater than your doubts, greater than your past. You may not have said it out loud, but your soul whispered it, and heaven heard the whisper. You might wonder how heaven responds to moments like these. It doesn't always respond with signs in the sky or miracles that defy physical laws. Most often, heaven responds with alignment, with synchronicities, with clarity, with peace, with support, with openings, with inner shifts that change everything. And soon, you will begin to notice these subtle responses. Something will flow that once felt blocked. Something will become clear that once felt confusing. Something will heal that once felt heavy. But even before any of that arrives, heaven delights in you simply because you grew today, even if no one else sees it, even if no one else applauds it, even if no one else recognizes the battle you fought internally. Heaven saw, heaven felt, heaven responded. There is something powerful about spiritual maturity. It doesn't depend on external validation. It depends on alignment. And today, you aligned, even slightly, even imperfectly, even momentarily. But that moment was enough to send a ripple through the unseen world, enough to open new possibilities, enough to shift your timeline, enough to call forth support you didn't know you had. And this is why the divine is delighted with you, not because you lived a flawless day, but because you lived a conscious one, a sincere one, a spiritually aware one. You showed up with intention, with heart, with willingness, and willingness is the key that unlocks everything. And so, as this day folds gently into memory, let your heart rest in the quiet truth that you are seen, you are held, and you are guided. What you did today echoed far beyond this physical world. It touched a place that only sincerity can reach. It ouched a realm that responds not to perfection, but to authenticity. And in that sacred exchange, heaven recognized you, not as someone striving to become worthy, but as someone who has always been worthy. Carry this with you. Every small act of kindness, every brave thought, every moment you choose growth over fear becomes a bridge between who you've been and who you are becoming. The divine delights in your progress, the divine celebrates your willingness, and the divine walks with you into every tomorrow you cannot yet see. So step forward gently with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are guided. Step forward knowing that heaven is not waiting for you to be extraordinary. Heaven is moved by your sincerity, your presence, your truth. Step forward knowing that what you did today was enough. You were enough, and you will continue to be enough. Let this be the reminder your soul carries into every new day. You are not walking alone. You are not growing unnoticed. And every time you choose love, every time you choose awareness, every time you choose to rise, heaven feels it, receives it, and rejoices in you. You touched heaven today, and heaven, in its quiet and unwavering way, touched you back.